Good afternoon. Is staff ready? Yes, I think staff is ready. And is council ready? I'd like to call today's council meeting for the town of Yountville. This is a regular meeting, and today is Tuesday, November the 5th, Election Day. Not that anybody up here on the dais is nervous, but we have a couple people who are be looking for seeing how votes come out tonight for sure. All right, it is now exactly 3 o'clock, and I will ask for a roll call, please.
Councilmember Reeves?
Here.
Councilmember McKee Kent?
Here.
Councilmember Knight?
Here.
Vice Mayor Tripp?
Here.
Mayor Moeller?
Here, thank you. Could we all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. And can I, if there's no changes, I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
Move adoption of the agenda. Second.
You just do roll call. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Now, council member comments. I have one I would like to mention, which is I know that the council has probably seen a lot of letters to the editor and articles that have been in the Yountville Sun. Maybe you've been walking around and heard people talking that maybe we need to have a more thorough discussion, open discussion, now that everybody knows about the this previous discussion we had on the George Yount statue. So I would just like to make that suggestion since we all voted in the affirmative, that's correct, town attorney, that we can bring that back for reconsideration. Okay, great.
Thank you, Mayor. So I definitely am interested in having us doing a study session on the Legacy Trail and just having a broader discussion about the what we are talking about when we're supporting a Legacy Trail, maybe how it connects with our art and walk, but. I think it's good for us to have a broad kind of conversation about the importance of the Legacy Trail and how we, and in my mind, in 2 years and 2027, it'll be the 160th anniversary of the naming of the town, and so I think having this conversation, talking about the Legacy Trail and the history of the community. What we're celebrating in April is the incorporation of the town this last 60 years, but having a good discussion, a community discussion will be beneficial, so I support it.
Okay, great. Vice Mayor Tripp.
I also support it, perhaps along the lines of what Councilmember Knight said, a discussion of, because the issues kind of evolved from a very specific statute in a very specific location, which was considered at one meeting, and then we looked at a broader concept of the Legacy Trail, and then subsequently, as the mayor has alluded, a lot of people expressed opinions, and then I've heard opinions about whether we need a separate Legacy Trail versus an art walk. And so I think a step back to look at the issue in total, but of course to focus on the statue or whatever memorialization of George Yount seems appropriate would be a good thing. And I think most of us welcome community input, which there wasn't a lot on either of the first two rounds. So I think that would be helpful from my perspective.
Okay. Councilmember Reeves, you want to make a comment?
I'm also in agreement on this. I just want to make sure that the discussion is around the procedure and how we select historical figures to go onto this Legacy Trail and why we are having this Legacy Trail. I think it's important to decide what the concept is and whether or not we're celebrating community or some historical point in time. So I think those are issues to discuss at the same time.
Does staff have sufficient direction or any comments?
Yeah, I think that what I'm hearing, and I'll just confirm with nods, or if you want to give me further direction, is that we'll have a study session that'll discuss the statue and the Legacy Trail. That, as you know, is designed to be kind of an open forum, dialogue with the community, no decisions made by the council, just listening. And then after that, assuming we want to move forward, then the staff would bring back kind of a program, if you will, for the Legacy Trail, and we can decide whether the statues or the plaques. I mean, I think there's lots of options, but I think starting with a study session and then moving to what would be a regular item where you would be in a position to make a decision and give direction to staff. Is that
Okay, and then we'll, not a date certain at this time.
Yeah, I was just going to offer the next date. I think that would be, and I know that Sam and I have been talking about the previous direction of coming back with something based on the last direction, which was a program with Legacy Trail, including the Sally and Pancha artwork over at the Pocket Park. We were talking about February. So I think we could have a study session in January, and the only meeting that's scheduled right now is January 7th. So we can work with all your calendars, but if January 7th as a pre-meeting at 1 or 2 o'clock to the regular meeting would be the next, to me, available time slot to do a study session. So you can pencil that in, and I can follow up, and then once we confirm it, we can make the public aware.
Okay, that sounds good. Council Vice Mayor Tripp?
Well, I was going to ask the town manager whether we could have a little more informal setting for a study session or workshop, but then I realized you're planning to do this right before the meeting, so that makes it harder to have something a little less formal, because as I understand this, the real gist of it is to have, for lack of a better word, a listening session, right? So it's somewhat hard in this room, has been my observation, to get people to feel comfortable to talk. So anyway, I just tossed that out, although I think I could see the logistics might be hard.
We can talk about the setup of the room. Obviously, the other advantage is we have all the video capability, and I know a lot of people like to watch it after. But I'm open to your ideas, so if you want to, through our briefings, offer suggestions. But this room does seem to work best. But we could set it up differently, whether that's you all coming down from because I know that's always kind of an issue of how do you participate more openly with the public when you're kind of up on the dais. But we're open to ideas, so we can respond if you suggest things.
All right, thank you. Any other council member announcements? Just one other town manager and I think last week we met with Cecilia Aguilar Curry. We didn't really have a specific agenda. It was just a meet and greet.
Just one announcement. There are 2 openings left in a walk that I'm helping organize with the Veterans Home to do a tree walk with Bob Heiss. He's the sort of the author of their tree pamphlet, and they have over 100 really important species trees up there, and he will be giving us a pretty exclusive tour of his highlighted trees. It will be about an hour starting on Friday at 10 a.m. And anyone who wishes to try for one of those 2 open slots, you can give me a call, and my number is 707-945-1133. Thanks.
All right, thanks. With that, I'll move on. Next item, we have we do have some, we don't have any proclamations, but we have some recognitions. I'm going to turn it over to Samantha for some introductions.
There we go. Good afternoon, Council and Mayor. Thank you. I'm Samantha Holland, your Parks and Recreation Director, and I'm excited to have with me today Rose Lopez and Caitlin Huss, who are our new recreation coordinators. They started, I think we're in our 4th week now, which is very exciting. And Rose is overseeing our adult classes, events, and excursions. And then Caitlin is joining us. Half of her time will be dedicated to Yountville Arts, and then assisting with department marketing as well as other town events. You guys want to come up here? Thank you. So we're really excited to have them. The first 4 weeks, we've really got off and running, and they're doing a terrific job. You'll start to see them more out in the community, and our team is getting to know each other really well, and we're feeling really positive about the growth. So I just wanted to welcome them here for you and the community as well. So,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and welcome to Yountville. I know you're going to love it, and Sam is going to be such a great boss. So I can already tell. All right. So next is, do we have anybody who would like to address the council on anything that is not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, and we have a consent calendar. Here's a. Before I get any discussion or take a motion, do we have any public who would like to make any comment on any item on our consent calendar tonight? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council. Is anybody, can I get a motion or a second, or are there any comments or discussion on our consent calendar tonight?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Councilmember Knight might have a comment.
I'll second.
Okay, that's your comment. Thank you very much. So would you like us to hit our buttons to vote? Nope, just all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, any abstained, passes unanimously. Thank you, Town Clerk, and guest presentations. So we have our Napa County Sheriff Office is going to be giving the quarterly report, and we have Sergeant Baumgartner, who's going to be giving that tonight, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Town Council. On behalf of Sheriff Ortiz, I am your local sheriff and liaison, James Baumgartner. Today, I'll be presenting the third quarter informational report 2024, July, August, September. So first slide, calls for service, patrol checks. As you can see, 588 calls for service, patrol checks are 14, pretty consistent with all the other quarters. Reports and arrests, we had, out of those 588 calls for service, we took 6 reports and made 2 arrests. And next slide. Your crime stats, the domestic violence was 1, petty theft 2, grand theft 2, and we did have an auto theft of 1, total of 5. The petty thefts were cell phones. The grand theft was a copper thief, and I think it was a bicycle. The difference between petty theft and grand theft is the $950. Anything less than that is petty theft. Anything more than that makes it a grand theft. The domestic violence was a Yountville resident was arrested for domestic violence. The case was dismissed by the DA's office and not prosecuted. That does happen. It was a mandatory arrest. Therefore, the Yountville deputy made the arrest, but the DA's office did not pick up the charge. The another incident that my phone was ringing on was the search warrant that was served north end of town on the suspect that was arrested for manslaughter and hit and run out of St. Helena. St. Helena is the primary agency and lead, and that case is still going through the court process now. Next slide, please. So this is our traffic graph. There was one report of traffic collision. It was a hit and run on a parked car. I believe it was a rental car in one of the hotel parking lot. No damage, or minor damage, no injury. No suspect informational report. Traffic citations, pretty consistent at 5. misdemeanor citations. One, and that was one of the arrests, was it was an individual that was stopped for vehicle code violations and found to be driving on a suspended license, and he was issued a misdemeanor driving while suspended, which is an arrest, and then released on a citation. Parking citations up 22 from 7, vehicle checks 8, and traffic stops at 56, pretty consistent. Mike Malott was on fire last year at this time, 67 and 59.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So these are the bullet points on your left are events that the Sheriff's Department was directly involved in, either signing off permits or actually being at the events. We had the big event, the French Laundry, where Washington Street was shut down. That permit process was pretty interesting to be a part of, and I believe it'll be a lot smoother this coming next year, hopefully. But it worked, and there was no calls for service. I mean, all these bullet points, there might have been one music complaint. Everything went by smooth, and there was no issues. And the bullet points go in order from as they happened. The Yountville Night Out, huge success. We had a great time. Thank you. I would just like to thank the members of the community, especially the hosts at each event, to make it happen. And obviously, Hillary, you did a wonderful job. Without your help, it was a huge success. Thank you. And the horses had a great time as well. Another 9/11 memorial at Cal Fire. That was a nice event to be a part of. I do have one request from Cal Fire's. Other than the pancake breakfast, I would like bacon on the menu, please. And of course, the Upper Valley Waste Management council meetings that I do attend.
Thank you for coming for those.
Another hat I wear, other than being your liaison, is I was voluntold to be a part of this Napa Critical Animal Response Team, and I traveled to the Park Fire in Chico, where I learned what I'll be doing in an event that we have a fire like we did, Atlas and all that, and so it was a great training experience for me. If we were to get called, I would deploy this team, and we'd go out and rescue animals. And if we can't rescue them, we would keep them shelter in place, and then we would feed them, because it's going to be in a evacuation zone. Therefore, the homeowners can't get there. So we would be feeding them and taking care of them, watering them, etc. Another thing that we attended was the St. Helena Calistoga Bike Trail grand opening. Myself and Deputy Mulgado rode the Yountville bikes up there. Mike Moore, the Yountville deputy, is a field training officer. He had Antonio Valerga, who is a new hire. So if you see two people in a car, it's probably one of the trainees, and you will probably get a ticket if you're stopped. Another specialty request we had was this young man in the Spider-Man outfit. He told his mom he wanted the police at his birthday party, so we showed up. And thank you, Public Works and Sam Holland, for getting our floors polished and cleaned. It's beautiful. And I kind of, for your crime tip, this has been happening all over the state of California, all over Napa, Yountville. Got multiple calls regarding this scam. It's a scam by email or telephone, where somebody is demanding money because they have your information, they know what you've been doing, and they're requesting to be paid in Bitcoin and or gift cards. If somebody requests to be paid in Bitcoin or gift cards, it's a scam. So please be vigilant and report anything to us. We want to know what's going on, so please call. You're not going to be bothering us. And I think that's it. Yeah. If you see something, say something. Thank you. Any questions?
Just a quick one. I think your last time you were here, your crime tip that we should watch out for, people climbing poles because they were stealing copper, and it looked like one of the report was you have some copper stolen.
Yeah.
Are these
Yeah.
the lines?
So the Yountville got that crime stat because the car stop was made in the town of Yountville, but the crime was actually outside of the town of Yountville. The deputy that made the stop and then I think Deputy Malgado, the Yountville deputy, backed him up. So that's again why it was a Yountville stat. But the actual theft was not involved in Yountville. It was just outside. But they are cutting all that fiber optic line and stripping it for the copper, causing $20,000-$30,000 in damage for $500 worth of copper.
So sometimes when people's cell phones or things like that
Exactly.
don't work, it could be that.
It could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll know that that is happening here, and we'll remember that tip. So
Yep.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Any other Councilmember Knight? Do you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Nope. All right. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And next, Napa County CAL FIRE. We have Battalion Chief Ishman. Correct? Did I get that right?
It was close. So Ryan Isham's one of my partners, but I am your Battalion Chief J.C. Greenberg,
Greenberg. Okay.
for the town over here.
All right.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. And I'm pleased to go over our
It is Greenberg.
report for the months of July, August, and September. We can go to our first slide. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So the first, we'll go over our stats here. So we'll be looking at the large pie chart on the left-hand side, and that shows the calls that are broken up throughout, not only the town of Yountville, the Vets Home, the county of Napa, and then there's a small sliver in there for the city of Napa. So this is where the engine and truck that's housed out of here, out of Yountville, where they respond throughout. So you'll see up there was 107 calls here in the town, 196 in the county, 134 at the Vets Home, and then 4 for city and Napa. So that's for this third quarter. And then the other charts that reference up here is really what we're looking for is the trend tracking. So where are we at in comparisons a year ago, and then where are we at on a 5-year average? So I think the important thing to note out of here is that over the 5-year average, we're starting to see an increase. So roughly about just over 10% is where we're sitting for this past quarter, and even a year ago on comparison of the 5-year average there. And next slide. This shows the breakdown of the calls that we went to, that we serviced here in the town. So it gives us a flavor of really what are the emergencies that are happening here with either the residents themselves, the tourists that are coming in throughout the town itself. So you'll see right there we have 62% medical aids, public assists up there at 28%. Traffic collisions is usually a fairly small number, 2%. And then we did not have any fires this quarter throughout the town itself. Next slide.
While you're on this slide, will you please give an example of what the public assists?
Sure can, yeah, especially because it's a larger percentage this quarter than it has been in the past. If somebody is locked out of their house, if they just need some kind of assistance, then we go in there to help them. Sometimes it could also be that there's a tree down, so it's a public assist. We'll go in, we'll help them cut that
A wide
up.
variety of things.
Yeah, so it is a kind of a catch-all, usually non-emergent, so that's why it's put off into that category. A lot of times we don't even go lights and sirens. We show up there, and then we wind up assisting them. Just make their day better, make it easier, and we have the tools to help them in personnel, and we'll help them in that manner.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The Vets Home, we put this in here just because this is a large portion of our calls as well, and that is part of the town right above here. Medical aids is a theme that we see every quarter. We're glad to go up there and help and participate with those members up there, get them to the care that they need, and assist them, and with AMR, get them to the hospital. So that continues to be the bulk of those calls. Once again, you'll see some public assist. If somebody fell, couldn't get up, they need some assistance, and you'll even see a traffic collision up there. It does happen, very rare. They're usually minor in nature, but we do go there to assist. And then the other one is alarm soundings. common for fire alarm soundings, especially in the commercial facilities and with the number of vets buildings up there in the aging facility. It is common. But I will say over the past 10 years, they have done quite a bit of improvements internally to reduce those numbers. Those numbers were skewed from what we do see here in today. So good improvement up there for them. Next slide. Next, we'll kind of go over some events that happened throughout here with the Yountville crew, some different trainings. And this first one was a very interesting call that they got sent to. It's actually not here in the town, but it's up at Lake Hennessy. On the very sharp first corner as you enter the elevation of the lake, there was a car that had went off the road and landed in the water and was submerged. So we got called out for that. We have specialized equipment and gear to actually make that entry into the water. In this particular situation, when I showed up there, we had the aerial ladder truck. We brought that out. They set up a rope system to actually lower somebody over the embankment so that we had positive capture of one of our own people. We lowered them down so that they could search the vehicle for any persons that may have been trapped inside. So quick response by your team here at Yountville to assist up there. Fortunately, the vehicle was unoccupied, but as far as the crews themselves being able to make a difference, if somebody was trapped inside, that they have all the equipment and training expertise to get somebody in there to help them. So something kind of out in the ordinary we don't see a whole lot. Next slide. Quite a bit of training going on. So a lot of this is just lesser use skills that our crews train on to make sure they're proficient. So there's kind of a lot going on right here in this picture. This was a joint training with our Napa County Rescue Team in the city of Napa as well, but a simulated car into a ditch or an embankment that requires a large discipline of tools and experience, expertise to go in there and shore up the sides, capture the car so they don't go down further, use our extrication equipment, rope gear to actually go in and open the vehicle up to get a patient out so that we can provide them care. So hopefully we never run into this, but in our line of work, we train for the worst and make sure that we're prepared for that day if it does happen. So, but just to give you an example of the type of complex incidents that we expect or could respond to that we're training for every week for sure. Next slide. I think our big event right here is the 9/11 ceremony over at the station, and I appreciate everyone here that did show up. That was such a great event and large attendance there. The crew cooked pancakes for everyone. There's a lot of great speeches for 9/11 and kind of what it really meant to us and what was going on in our lives at that time. And a lot of us, shared some stories that really kind of brought us back to really what that was 23 years ago. So a great event. Thank you again for everyone's attendance. And I think the part at the end there where we did an inauguration of our brand new Truck 12 and we did a historical ceremony of actually pushing it into the bay for the first time. So that's a mark of a brand new apparatus that's going into service for the community here. And everyone was a part of it to help push that in. So. Still looking on the front bumper there on that top right photo. I'm not seeing any deputies, but maybe we can get them to participate next time.
No, it was great, and you had, your big ladder up and that giant flag, so that was watching them fold that as it was coming down. It was quite an event, so Thanks for doing that.
Put some bacon in, maybe a box of donuts. They'll show up
Yeah,
again.
don't forget the donuts. Yeah.
All right, next slide.
Bacon donuts.
Rope rescue training here. So once again, we talked about some of the types of emergencies that we can go to. So you'll see on the left-hand side right here, it's actually one of our firefighters that's in a Stokes basket vertical. That's for a patient who's non-ambulatory, can't walk, where we package them up and we may have to raise them to get them back up to a safe landing area. Over in the middle slide right here, you'll see a rope systems that we use for making access to patients, to actually even get access in, extricate them out, and then bring them down those same high-line rope systems. And then the far right picture, this is a rappelling exercise that we do practice, so that if we do have to get even like a service worker who's normally in a harness that's working in high elevations and they have an accident or get stuck, that we'll actually go topside from a roof and then rappel down, make a capture of them, and then bring them back up to safety. So a lot of high risk, low frequency type training events, but stuff that we're out there working on, practicing every month that we're doing. Next slide. This right here was an event that was for the public service members, and I know the Napa Sheriff's Department was here for this as well, but it was for the service members here in the Valley. It was a fundraiser that was put on for mental health for these service members, a fundraiser that brings money in to help out these first responders when they're in that time of need or problem. So kind of a different type of event. We're usually there supporting other fundraiser and events, and this one was put on for our first responders, and we all went down and participated in it, and you'll see we had the flag flying up for this one as well. But great event, a lot of attendance there, great support, but just another thing that this valley and this town produces for the first responders. So it's a good event to be a part of, and we thank everyone for that. Next slide. Safety message. So first off, before we kind of tie into this, I think every time that the quarterly report comes up, there's some kind of extreme event. I think the last one was we had 105, 106 degree temperatures, and we were having to change of pace, find cooling places, stations for everyone. And right now we're in the middle of a red flag. So it's November. We're hoping for rain. We've got a small taste of it, and then it kind of dried up. But now until Thursday, we're expected to have 20 to 40 with gusts up to 50 mile an hour north winds, relative humidities in the teens, which is all recipes for fast-moving, disastrous fire. So we are prepared for this. We are staffed up. Having CAL FIRE and Napa County Fire as part of your cooperative agreement here, we brought in extra engines into the valley for the next couple days. We brought on extra overhead water tenders so that we have preparedness. We have our night flying helicopters and all of our air tankers ready to go. So just as we move through these next couple days, limit some of your exposure. A lot of wildland fires are human caused, so be cautious in what you do. PG&E is doing PSPS power outages to help prevent some fire starts. So something just to be aware of, but just know that we have the team built for it, and we'll see what surfaces out of there. But 50 mile an hour winds in wildland fires does cause concerns, as we've seen in 2017 and also even in the Butte County fires that happened in November. So even though the calendar says November, it's not always rain. But one thing I also want to bring up, because as soon as this red flag goes away, we're going to be back into seasonal averages, which is cool mornings in the 30s, and people are going to start using their heaters, furnaces, fireplaces. So making sure that everything has proper maintenance, filters, chimneys clean, but also we don't want to see somebody bring one of those heating elements into service and then have problems and end up with a fire. So safety tip for that is just make sure that you do some annual inspection and have somebody come out and do the cleaning and proper maintenance for it. So with that, any questions?
Any questions? Vice Mayor Tripp.
It's so interesting to hear about the training. It's so interesting to hear about the training because it's something we don't think about. We just expect you to be there doing it all. But I was just curious, do you at this station decide what training you're going to do and then do it, or does that come from Napa Fire Department, or how does that work, just in terms of deciding what equipment, what sort of issues you want to look at and try to train on? Yeah, no, absolutely. Good question. So it's kind of twofold there. So we do have a whole monthly calendar that is a rotating types of disciplines or training topics that we do. So those are kind of the ones that we hit every single month. So that's with the paid personnel, the volunteer personnel, that we come together, or multi-company drills. I talked about how Napa City joins us for some of these because large events that are very technical, it takes the resources to do that. And then the other part of your question is we
We also have other specialized topics that our fire captains put on, and then also the rescue team is stationed over here at Yountville as well. So they have a lot of that specialty type of equipment that those captains and myself, we put those drills on for the personnel just to make sure that we're well-rounded in all those. So, yeah, absolutely.
Councilmember McKee, can you have a question?
That's a good question.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Great slides, everybody, and thanks for all your work this past quarter. Greatly appreciate it. We have next item, public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight. Any administrative reports from town manager?
Well, we have a staff report.
Okay. So you have no administrative items. I would just move on to the staff presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that. Staff presentation informational reports. We are going to preview the ZDRB study session for the Yountville Commons.
Yeah, thank you. We have Brendan Kelly joining me up here, and Carrie Morgan, his partner, in the audience, who have been, as you know, our lead design team. And the point of this afternoon's presentation is to, in essence, preview what the ZDRB is going to see, and we will have a much deeper conversation next Tuesday with them through a study session format, which we'll get into. If you saw, there was a lot of attachments to the staff report. Those are intended to also give the ZDRB and the community an extra week to look at them, because it's a lot of information, so we recognize that. So I know in some cases trying to give that extra week is useful. And really what we're seeking direction from the council on is the process that we've been going through, the outreach process in this visioning phase. So we will start there and end there, and then in the middle we'll kind of give you some updates, and obviously open to any comments you make, but really want to kind of focus on the process to make sure we get that right, because we're about midway through, a little past, about maybe 2/3 the way through. And this is the big picture sort of the process that you've seen quite a bit now that we're headed for November, which is the third leg of the stool of your boards and commissions, which started with Park and Rec Advisory Commission, and then it went to the Measure S as the Affordable Workforce Housing, and then ZDRB. We wanted to expand on the open houses and kind of how we envision 25 moving forward. So here's an updated version of this slide. And you can see at the top of November is where we are today here with an update. Next Tuesday will be the ZDRB. And then Brendan will talk about this at the end in terms of the community roundtable, which would be that Thursday. So sort of a different take on an open house, but an opportunity for the community. And then a series of what we're calling dinner and conversations. So these would be Sunday early evening dinners where we can also have conversations about the site, but in a little different format that Brendan will share. And then the goal of getting back to the council on March 4th. With at least the opportunity to make a decision, which I've been referring to as conceptual approval, and which would then start off the planning phase, which then goes into more of the, I'll call it the regulatory sort of requirements, CEQA, et cetera. So at that point, we need to make some decisions so that we have a program that can be analyzed through the process. I expect, and haven't asked them yet, but I expect Brendan or Kelly Morgan to continue, but we'll need to bring in some specialists and some expertise at that point to make sure that we're going through the right process. And I've already been talking to Gary about that as well on the legal side. So that's what we're laying out. And again, the last slide is this slide. So we'll end here and we can kind of talk this through, and you can ask Brendan questions after he's expanded on what I just said. This is the proposal for a new sign that will go where the existing school sign is on Yount Street. So if you can squint your eyes and see that, there's on Yount Street, there's a "You Are Here." So most of you know the entry point into the school. There's currently a sign that says Yountville elementary school, old wood sign. We would replace it with a big version of this. This would help as people that walk by would be able to, see what's going on, join the conversation. It talks about office hours, which are the million cups of coffee that Brendan and Carrie have been hosting. But it also has a QR code, which can give you the ability to sign up for that or the dinners and some of the new stuff. So just kind of we've been talking about this. I want to make sure we get this right so that when we print it and it goes up, everyone's happy with it. So if you have any comments at the end on what you'd like to see on the sign, we're welcome to take those. We have not printed the sign yet, but we are ready to do that and put that up this week if everyone is good with this. And then I just wanted to quickly talk about some of the statistics that we provided at the Measure S committee meeting, because I do think these are important. And like I said earlier, Brendan will then get into sort of previewing some of the ZDRB stuff. But this data was taken out of both our housing element, and then we did a survey of our businesses, which we got decent participation on, which asked some questions. But you can see based on the at least 2015 census data, this was in our general plan, that we have almost 3,000 total jobs in the town of Yountville, which is far more than we have residents. And roughly half of those jobs are for our hospitality service workers. And obviously a lot of those jobs are not high-paying jobs. And most of those jobs, 92%, are for people that do not live inside the town. So there's a clear need for workforce/affordable housing for hospitality service workers. There's also, to me, a clear sort of climate issue that we should try to address about the commutes and now what we call the super commutes, people that are actually commuting more than an hour to get to their job. And I think these are things we should be focused on as we talk about all the ideas, right? Because there are so many ideas, but this is a very specific need to Yountville, and I think it's important for us to keep this front and center. And then this kind of looks at where do all of our employees live? Well, about half live in Napa, and then the rest are sort of just spread out based on this chart, a lot in Vallejo and Fairfield, some in St. Helena or Up Valley and Calistoga, et cetera. But pretty glaring, right, when you look at just how far people come in to work here in Yountville. And then, and then this gets into how do people get here, and most people just drive alone or drive, with one other person. I mean, there is some carpooling, very little transit, and I will tell you as someone that walks to work every day, it's definitely a quality of life thing. We all know this, and I do think this is something we can talk about as we get into the ZDRB conversation, and then hopefully through the dinners and so forth. It's not just about like the architecture and the place. It's about these other things too that need to be really intentional, because at the front end of the design or in the planning, this is where a lot of these decisions get made. You get to the back end and then you feel trapped, and then you want to start over, and it's impossible. So it's something that I think I just want to emphasize. And then I'll turn it over to Brendan here, and this is more of sort of regional reporting, which is another obvious issue. I mean, we are in a very rich valley, as we all know, with a lot of needs. And I'm going to continue to try to focus on Yountville, but it's important to understand the region at the same time. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I have a question.
A really quick question on your slide. Where you
Can you turn your mic on? Thanks.
There are 1,125 residents in the workforce. So that means people who just live here are working, not necessarily in hospitality or in Yountville.
Correct.
They're just working. Okay,
Yeah.
just wanted to. Okay.
Welcome.
It's nice to be here.
You don't have to do anything. It's all going to happen
Is it all good?
behind the
All right,
curtain.
I'm not going to touch
So
anything.
It's all happening.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, Mayor, fellow council members. It's great to be back in front of you today. We've been busy. Of course, we've met a lot of you, and during our office hours, we've met a lot of commissions, both in a room like this. We were in front of the Measure S group a couple weeks ago, I think. It's all a blur. We're just to continue with this deck and some of the things that Brad's touching on. the reason that we're talking about workforce housing is that many homes, maybe 50%, maybe more, in Yountville are empty. And they're not empty because no one can figure out what to do with them. They're empty because they're waiting there for another user, a second homeowner typically, or a visitor, not somebody who's working here. And the time to fix that would have been 20 years ago, but the second best time to fix that was last April when you bought this site, and which is really kind of the job at hand for us. But this slide from the State of Housing in Napa Valley report by the county describes that you're not alone. The average age of housing of home buyers is 58 today when it was 38 20 years ago. So this is something that's happening nationally, certainly across the state. Everybody is dealing with this. Not everybody is addressing it as quickly as the town of Yountville. So we're all, I think, inspired by about how we can quickly get to some solutions and some alternatives. Everybody that we've talked to, both in sessions like this and in our office hours, wants to help solve the problem. There may be people out there, and we'd like to hear them if they're there. This is certainly an open invitation, but we have not yet met anybody that doesn't want housing, more workforce housing in the town of Yountville. So that's good. Makes our job a lot easier. I have the controls right here.
Maybe before you move off, I do have a question. So when you got some great statistics from our businesses. So when you actually, did you just kind of reach out with a form and you got numbers back, or did you talk to people? What are you hearing from the businesses about, how some of their employees would actually want to come here, or are they in multi-generational families, or they have other situations, or what kind of demand and what are they looking for?
Well, first of all, we did do a questionnaire, and we asked, was it 5 questions, Hillary? It was a very simple questionnaire. In essence, where do you work, where do you live, how do you commute? But I will tell you, I have started to, just informally talk to service workers. I mean, on Saturday I was talking to the 2 doormen at the Vintage House, and both of them lived in Napa. Both of them were single. Both of them are paying about $2,500 a month in rent in Napa. And both of them would love to live in Yountville. You question, how do they pay $2,500? We used to say a third of your income should go to rent. I think we're now beyond a half. And, how do you make it work? I didn't get into do you have a second job, or are your parents wealthy? Those sorts of questions that can contribute to these sort of hard things. But I think, as you talk to waiters or bartenders and busboys and all the service workers, it's clear they all have a different story, but I do think there is enough of people that are really needing, something that is, in essence, we talk about the missing middle. You also talk about affordability levels below that, and there are definitely, I think, some service workers in Yountville that would probably meet both low and very low income levels in the region. So I think you can kind of hit everyone, truthfully, if you talk to enough people. So a questionnaire aggregates the data, and as you know, and it's useful. But I think the overwhelming statistic to me is that we have approximately, it's seasonal, but approximately 1,500 service workers. So almost the same number of residents that we do service workers in this town. And one of the beautiful things about Yountville is they can all walk to work, right? There's no place other than, we can get into the Vets Home conversation, which to me is a separate conversation, but it's an important one. This is possible in Yountville. And I think, there's no way you could say that you can't, get to work, at least by a bicycle. And I think walking to work. So I think we have some unique attributes that give us unique opportunities to, try to sort of hone in on that data from our service worker demographics. But again, 1,500, I mean, we're not going to build, I don't want to get into numbers of units, but we're limited, even though we have a big piece of property. So I clearly think we can max out whatever the community is comfortable with, and we could, if we just wanted to do that, we can fill that. But I mean, we do want to do more than just that, right? This is the conversation I think we've been having, we'll continue to have, we'll listen to everyone, and we'll come back. And it won't be, just so you know, on March 4th with like, okay, here's the housing, 112 units with 3 for this and 4 for that and 10 for this. It'll be a program which is basically some parameters,
yeah.
I'll call them, and then we'll start to go into the next level. And, the sad truth about service workers in the most case, I mean, there's exceptions, but they are pretty transient. And so, I'm sure we could get data about turnover. But that's part of the problem too, because of unstable housing, there's a lot of turnover. So yeah, I could go on and on, but I do think that I am, as a town resident, definitely, if I sit down for dinner, like I've got a little shtick with the waiter and the busboy, which is basically starts with, "Hey, where do you live? Do you live?" You start with there, and then you can kind of lead to a lot of questions. So I think it's all good data, but I think we generally can all sit in this room and understand that this town has this need without having to, do much research.
Vice Mayor Tripp, do you mind if we interrupt you? Or you want us to wait? Or
No, please
okay.
interrupt. This is what it's for.
Okay, Vice Mayor Tripp.
So I'm assuming, town manager, that as you're doing your investigation, those dinners aren't business expenses.
No, they're not.
I'm just teasing you. But I also just wanted to say I'm really delighted to hear that nobody's objecting to, affordable housing, however you define that. But, it's also, we don't, in some ways, one of the parameters of having spent money from the Affordable Housing Fund to buy the site is, I don't want to say we don't have a choice, but I think we probably, and Gary might support this, we don't have a choice because we used funds to purchase the property. But it's good news. I think most people do align with that, but it's sort of part of how we made this whole thing work.
So we're at the juncture of, so we've done a lot of fact finding. The general plan, very thorough in its, I don't know, 5th or 6th or 8th edition, and a very new housing element, 253 pages. There's a lot of things that the town has already decided on in terms of policies, which is what we're trying to kind of absorb and repeat back. So a lot of like, hey, I wonder if it could be a water park. A lot of these things have been decided that, that housing is important. This is how you do public outreach. This is the spectrum of engagement that we're following. So we do have a lot of demands that the town already has in its policies. And we're going through that with commissions, sometimes one at a time, and sometimes with sort of our own groups. And we're at the stage, and we've been in this condition with a few who have strong opinions, and we are about to meet a lot of people with strong opinions because we're about to start showing alternatives in the next couple of weeks. And for the town, for the community, including you, of course. So you can have your own opinions, but you can't have facts, right? You can't have your own idea about who lives here, who works here, what kind of housing is missing. These things have been determined, and we're trying to share that and incorporate it into the design alternatives. And our job is to bring you alternatives from which to choose, a range of viable alternatives. And I think we'll be able to do that. And I think we'll be able to do that by March. And part of this meeting today is to make sure that you're updated on how we're going to do that, so that when we do bring the alternatives, we've talked to a lot of your neighbors.
One more question, Councilmember Knight.
No, please.
Thank you. No, just a quick comment. I just wanted to thank you for what I'm seeing here is your willingness to add more and very creative ways of connecting and connecting with the community and doing community outreach. And I also wanted I noted I appreciate the fact that you're continuing your copy with the community from November now all the way to February.
Correct.
So all this outreach I think is important, and I appreciate your being very supportive and working with residents and the council and staff to really extend this so that we have good comment and good input. Thank you.
You're welcome. It is our honor and pleasure. It really is. And we're good at it. That's why we're in this business. We are mismatched. This is one of the most important pieces of information that when everybody hears it, they kind of go, oh, yeah, I know someone, or that's me. So we have a whole bunch of 1.5 person households in a whole bunch of 3.3 bedroom houses. And it's not just Yountville. It's up and down the valley and up and down California. And we have older households who really can't move anywhere. They can't literally stay here and move because there isn't anywhere smaller to move to. So it's not only workforce and affordable housing. There are people, residents, who would love to be able to move to something smaller and stay in Yountville, but there's no stock because the stock is all kind of one unit, one home, two-car garage, essentially what developers were building for the last 50 years in this state. And Yountville, because of the Veterans Home and because of some other projects around town, actually has quite a high percentage of multifamily and group living structures. Veterans Home is one obvious example, but so is Hopper Creek, and there are a number of duplexes and the 8plexes at Arroyo Grande. Those are 4plexes. And there are a lot of actually things that Yountville was doing 10 or 15 years ago that are just now brand new in other towns up and down the valley. So you can see that you're already well on your way because of some of the accidents and some of the conscious decisions that Yountville is already making for multifamily housing. We have gone through this and we'll go through it here. Single family housing is not the way to solve housing issues on this school site. It's just not big enough. You need the housing matches, the mismatch, and multifamily is a way to address the density and the affordability issues without losing some of the quality things. I always, in other slides, I would bring up Brooklyn Heights, which is, of course, one of the most expensive suburban neighborhoods in America, right on the Hudson, and multi-million-dollar homes, 3 stories, all jammed in, completely like sardines. I think you could fit one block on this job site. So the idea of density doesn't go to poor quality housing, but we don't need a block from Brooklyn Heights here in Yountville. We need it to be kind of more like Yountville. This is an example. This is one of the alternatives, right? The first alternative is the school as it sits today, looking for a tenant of another school. It's not likely. So alternative one, leaving it alone, is not really likely as a viable alternative. The second alternative, of course, you've seen this, the 42 or the 48 townhomes, which drove the price from the school district, and that doesn't have any open space, it doesn't have any civic storefronts, it takes care of one kind of housing need, but Yountville doesn't need this kind of housing. It's got second homes all day long to exchange, and they should be exchanged for high value. It's a lovely, lovely town. We're not trying to make workforce housing at the cost of very high quality second homes all the way through town. You can have both. And there are many great examples all across California and all across this country where there can be lovely second homes and a very stable supply of affordable workforce housing. Okay, so one of the ways we're doing it, we've talked about the policies. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but these are very established things, and we can't just start inventing them. What we are doing is applying them and then explaining how they look like physically on the site. It could be in different ways. These are, of course, the famous RHNA numbers. Everyone's going to know about RHNA numbers at the end of this process. And we spent a lot of time with Measure S. Your number is 72. It went from 17 to 72. And just like San Francisco's went into the thousands, everybody is responsible for much bigger numbers. Our Our goal is 72 homes. I have caught myself, and I'm encouraging others to stop using the word units, which is good for people who run housing agencies, because a unit is a unit, but really we're talking about homes. And that's what you live in. You don't live in a unit. I don't live in a unit. We're talking about homes. And homes can be one-bedroom homes. Homes can be three-bedroom homes. The state doesn't distinguish. And we're going to be able to make a lot of headway with one-bedroom homes, and and some smaller and some a little bigger. So far, so good? So one of the events that we had last August was a This Not That. These are all different types of outdoor rooms and different architecture and trees. We got a lot of good responses to these images. At the same time, we got a lot of feedback that stark, modern, no trees, big hulking buildings aren't really kind of part of Yountville's vibe. I know that that's a really technical term, but even though these are all very handsome buildings, as an architect, I know that the town of Yountville and the people who've come to see us, like, that might look good in London or in downtown Boston, but not here in Yountville. We did scale studies. This is a good example of Old Town on the left and the trailer, the Rancho, the two trailer parks at the south end of town. Even though, and then you can kind of see through there, the red outline is the school site, the 7 acres, 8 acres of the school site. You can't solve the problem by using other densities from Yountville, even though there's quite a wide range of densities in the town of Yountville. All of them don't work for this school site to have some of the numbers and some of the smaller units and to address the mismatch that I talked about earlier. Does that make sense? We after talking to Parks and Rec, we did this exercise. Sam has some beautiful resources, maps and walks and other things, and we kind of compiled our own way to see it. And you can see on the left everything from the golf course to the close-up map on the right to Yountville Community Park and the Veterans Park and out to Forrester and the Vineyard Park where the pickleball court is. We've definitely gone to all the parks. And the message really is the town has a lot of amenities. What it needs is more full-time residents to use the amenities. And that's a really beautiful, rare event. Most housing projects, especially in big cities, are desperate to actually not just put the housing in there, but put the playground and put the dog park and put all these other things in there. And you actually have quite a range, including and especially the walking trail, that is a very kind of, it is one very beautiful part of the site that doesn't really need fixing. We just need to make sure it's not damaged in any way. I think the job is to enhance it, and I think it can be enhanced. The fence coming down was a good start. We've talked about civic storefronts. These are not all civic storefronts for this site need to be just a downstairs coffee shop or a bike shop. You can have actually a very shallow civic storefront. You can have kind of a medium one. You can have a small one. You can have, of course, the whole floor. This is a graphic that describes the variety that could be here with some businesses, because one of the problems with the school district solution of just putting houses here is that I would say 95% of the people that come to see us on our appointments they'll talk about housing, and of course everybody wants to see all these different alternatives that we're working on, but what they're missing is community. They're missing knowing their neighbors. They talk about that, and because the neighbors have sold their house, and now that house is owned by somebody else who's not a neighbor, right? I mean, they are, of course, physically, but they're not people who they know every day and every evening. So they want to know their neighbors. And the dog park, I will tell you, has been phenomenally popular from the people who we've spoken to, including people who have said, I wasn't for it, but I like it now because I got to meet a lot of people I never met before. So it's a playground for adults with their dogs actually kind of making the introductions. It's been very a fun part to watch. We've watched it. Of course, we weren't responsible for the creation of it, but it was fun to watch it go from idea to building to opening, and then people are using it, and it's been great. It's more than just shops. There's different kinds of things that can happen on the ground floors to activate a community of residents who may not find everything they need among wine tasting rooms and high-end restaurants in town, which of course are also beautiful, because I like to use those places just as much as you do. It's just that the town residents that we're speaking with want more, and they want more, something more, not a lot, but they want something more for them and sort of their everyday needs. Does that make sense? So the school site, obviously we're all thinking about it. It's bounded by it has its own hardships, and even the school district idea was to sort of put roads in here, and one of the first things that we are going to need to do is add edges. Edges add vitality, whether you have to add a garage or parking or a shop or houses, or just to get fire trucks to the future houses. So a lot of the alternatives that you're going to see are adding edges, and we talk about edges more than roads, because roads are just roads. But when it's a driveway or a different way to get back and forth, especially for people who can't walk across a field or a meadow, we're going to be adding edges, and we're going to be talking about edges with the ZDRB on next week in this room. So this is a quick graph of some of the things we've talked about. On the left is the existing school site, a public use in the blue, and the open space in the green. Everyone's used to that zoning, of course, being that zoning diagram, and the yellow of the single-family residences, only single-family residences, sort of kind of filling in the north sides, whether it was a condominium development or the houses around the Seventh-day Adventist neighborhood to the east. Alternative one in this diagram is the school district site, which is essentially just all single family besides the town hall carve out, which of course the town has owned for a long time. Also it's an alternative. It's the first alternative. It's what triggered things, but it's probably not going to be one of the viable alternatives that we recommend. But it will definitely be in the workbook, because you have to be able to tell people why you're doing this project, and they need to see it over and over again, even though no one that we've spoken with really likes it. And they have to understand why you paid X amount, the $11 million that you paid. And alternative one is the reason, because that's how much it's worth to somebody right now. The alternative three, I think it was my own sort of graphic pieces that didn't have the note, but alternative two here sort of shows the corner in green. And it's very ideal. Architects and urban designers love kind of town square. Yountville doesn't have a town square, but neither does St. Helena, and neither does Napa. And everybody's kind of got sort of to figure out what it is. Alternative three moves that green space in the house up to the west and the northwest, separating the field from the creek has problems. And there's not as much flexibility with alternative three, but my guess is that there'll be some people who like what we do there. Alternative four, which is very similar to how it feels right now with the baseball field, the south baseball field, and some of the civic and mixed use the housing and the civic ones along Yount Street, and then of course what I call the private park scheme, which is putting the green space all the way in the back corner. It might be nice for the people who look into it. It's probably not very understandable for everyone who will drive by for many, many years and probably never see that green space. So we are going to show these alternatives in more detail and more concepts with ZDRB, but we're showing all the possibilities and making sure that ZDRB has a chance to give us their input, some of their biases, and based on some of the facts we talked about, that we can solve many of the problems and still not create new ones for the town.
So I have a question here, because you said the magic word that's been kind of in my head and is flexibility. Because you gave us this great example, and if everyone had thought 25 years ago, don't build all of this because everyone's going to get old, or this is maybe the evolution of the town, and you should have done that. So how do we start thinking about that flexibility in terms of this all seems like it makes a lot of, I think we're always going to have a need for the middle income service workers, but I don't know what the but is, and I don't think any of us do because our crystal balls are never that great. So how do we think about that? Because I think that's a very important concept, the flexibility.
So on a week from tonight, we're with the ZDRB, and one of the things that we're going to be talking about is this missing middle. Right now, the town has a whole bunch of single-family residential homes.
Right.
A few of these multifamily things, very minor, some duplexes, things like Hopper Creek, but mostly it's single-family homes. And at the other end are assemblies of various and restaurants, like Bardesano is, of course, new, but there are other older buildings that are also hotels. They're designed for, essentially a few nights, maybe a couple of weeks stay with a pool and the restaurant. They're not really adaptable to anything else, right? So there's a missing middle is what the current term is. And it's not because San Francisco, Boston, a lot of other towns before a lot of planning codes were able to build duplexes, fourplexes, triple deckers, the live work units that all have since been either taken down, were never here in a rural town setting, or they've been taken over by other things. And the form-based architecture, we use this building or the French Laundry or the Grosvenor Estate building, things that were built for one thing and today are something very different, and tomorrow could be something completely different again, is part of our strategy for adding flexibility, so that when these buildings are put up, they don't all have to be built so that it's going to be housing forever as one bedrooms. They'll have a lot of flexibility built into them, so that in 20 years, and the town needs something else, they don't all have to be torn down. I'll bang up on the 1960s long, skinny school building next door. It's a very difficult thing to adapt. There's no plumbing inside of it to turn an empty room into like an apartment or a workshop or anything else like that. The way that they managed the spaces around it, it's very hard to reuse that building just because it's sitting there right next to us. Right. That's not form-based architecture. So it's not very flexible, is my point. And the idea is that the alternatives that we're going to put forward have to be basic enough that they fit the housing, but also so that in 20 years they can be something else.
So when you do that, I liked your this, not that. Can you give a form-based architecture example of this, not that, is form-based architecture?
Yes.
Okay.
You can go to the next slide because I want to just say one. Yeah, because I
don't want to take
wasn't sure. No, and I think I'm actually wanting to remind everyone, especially our lead designer, that this is not a design discussion.
Right.
And it's trust me, he can go on for hours, and I enjoy listening to it, and it is an interesting conversation. But I want to skip back focused here. But I wanted to sort of just say three things, and again, you can say whatever you want. But
I promised the council would be out by 4:30, so we're not going to.
Yeah, and I think
we're not going to go on and on.
Yeah, it's just. But I think three quick things where I would tell you, and he said one of them because form-based codes was kind of the big thing 20 years ago. It's tricky, and when you talked about fire, and I'm glad that our fire partners are in the audience. I think a lot of times, form sort of follows some of the regs that we're now confronted with, and access is a huge one with the fire department. You also, once you get to a certain height, the apparatus changes. It changes kind of what you can do. So there's all these little things that really sort of shape what we can and can't build in today's world. So I used to say, part of this is the building official and the fire marshal, and like we all need to get in a room. And once we have concepts, because there's a lot of things you can't do that you want to do, so that's important. I think that the second thing, and you use this term, which I like, civic storefront, okay? Because we've talked a lot in this town, and I've read about it. You've actually codified this idea of resident serving retail. And this is a huge conversation, right? And we could talk about that for another hour. But I think when you think of it as a civic storefront, and I think the images that were shown about how you can use the ground floor are really important to think about. Because that can be a lot of things, right? But when you use the word civic, I think it gets you more where you want to be than retail. Because retail, to me, is something that belongs on Washington. Not saying it doesn't belong on Yount, but I do believe we need to fill spaces on Washington. We need to think of civic needs that belong on Yount. And then the last thing I'll say, which gets to the missing middle, is this book, which I have ordered for the ZDRB and the council. So you will all get a copy of this. So this was a great graphic image of what he's talking about in terms of the missing middle. In terms of building types, because that's where I think you're going of what do all these things mean and how do you have flexibility? And I do think one of the things that you're seeing partly due to COVID and partly due to the demise of downtowns like San Francisco is everyone's trying to figure out how to turn office into housing. It's very hard. Okay. It isn't as easy as just a form-based discussion. You have a lot of issues with that. So even though we can talk about form-based and flexibility, I would tell you whether it's the fire department or whether it's other sort of building issues related to, electrification, et cetera, it's very hard. So I do think there are buildings like this that, this could evolve into a museum. But when we talk about housing, we should be very, I think, intentional. I keep using that word about what demographic are we trying to serve. And we can be creative and flexible, but it's not as easy as just, I guess, using terms like form-based code and missing middle.
It's all magic dust.
So hopefully that helps. And again, I think individually, I would encourage you to, again, go to see Brendan. Although you're kind of in this world of listening, as individuals, you can go and share your thoughts with me and more importantly, Brendan, so they can be integrated and listen to the Park and Rec and the Measure S and the ZDRB, because you can all listen to those dialogues. Those should really be where you're getting most of your, I guess, input as you're trying to piece this together. Okay.
So I just want to take a minute and talk about these next community outreach efforts, which are going to be very different from the exercises that we've had, including some of the one-on-one things, although those will continue. And they will get far more popular. I mean, we had a number of good conversations today, but when people start seeing actual built alternatives out on our model a week from today, those slots will fill up fast. And we know that, and we're prepared for that. We have the ZDRB presentation is on next Tuesday, as you know. The following Thursday, the 14th, in the community, in the Commons Room at 4 p.m. is really not in this kind of setting. We have two facilitators, Amy McPhee and Sandra Cully, from other parts of California. They love Yountville, and they've been here, of course. And I've worked with Amy and Sandra in Napa and other places. I've known them for 25 years. They're highly trustworthy for me. They are definitely aware of building communities, whether it's in Utah and landscape restoration, or up in the Sierras, or in Carmel, or in wine country. These are people I've worked with, that we've worked with, and they are going to be facilitating some of these open houses and some of these conversations, which will be limited to 30, 35 people, RSVP. There'll be some light refreshments on Thursday to mostly have a conversation, a facilitated conversation where they're not listening to me for an hour about housing types, because that can be, it's interesting, but that's not really what we need right now. Is for people to see alternatives and say, why did you do that? Or how about this? Or did you think about this? Or, hey, I have a memory. And a lot of it will be getting some soliciting opinions from a different voice, than mine or Carrie's. We're going to move those events to much more, even more methodical, even though the model will be in the room. We're calling it dinner and conversations because it will be a light supper, and it really is a facilitated conversation about ideas, about memory, about neighborhoods, about what you're missing, about what could happen here, whether it's dreamy or very functional. It goes from electric bikes to everybody sharing cars. There's a lot of good ideas that we've heard and that we've incorporated into some of these things. But it's important that the town doesn't actually only talk through me or town staff. And these dinners and conversations are for a place for us to back away and for the town to talk about these things with real examples, alternatives right in front of them that don't need a whole lot of interpretation. That's the reason why we built this model, so they could start moving things around and go, oh, wow, that's what 20 units looks like, and that's what 100 units look like. Okay, now I know what a unit is. But if it was a home, and if I wanted to live there, I'd want some more space, or whatever it is. But we need to hear from those voices. If we don't, we'll know pretty fast. I think that they will fill up quickly, and if we need more, we'll arrange more. They're easy to do. I think we have kind of the right amount once a month. They're on Sunday afternoons. It's definitely bring your own beverage and utensils and maybe share a dessert. The town will sort of share a simple meal as a way to kind of attract folks. I've heard that you can get folks from Yountville interested if you offer them some food and wine.
It's the opposite. They won't come unless you do.
Maybe that's what I heard.
Well, as I give you the hook, I'm going to thank you, okay? Because I think we're trying to get out of here at 4:30, I know. And I do want to thank both of you because, I mean, I think the commitment to the process has been, for me, unprecedented, but I think it's the passion that you hear, which is why I have to give them the hook. And I think now it's kind of the questions or any feedback you have. And just to finish, like, these new things are really an adaptation of the open houses that we already kind of outlined. And these do all fit within the scope of work we've negotiated with Kelly Morgan. So there's no added cost to this. It's just sort of us adapting to what we've heard during the first half or so of the process. So now we'd like to hear from you.
Vice Mayor Tripp, you're first.
So I wanted to, because today is the 5th and the 14th will be of November will be on us before we know it. So that is kind of a large open house workshop. Well, I have two comments. One, if you could just describe that a little so that people know, because I just have a sense sometimes people don't focus on what's going on, the community in terms of the opportunity. So I want to be clear on what will be happening. And then I just wanted to ask our communications director how we will advertise that, because that is an event that I think is really designed to be a little more free form and to get some general discussion going, or you can correct me if I'm wrong about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think, I know I've said, I guess privately, but I'll say publicly, the staff and the council are not invited to the roundtable. Okay, this is a community discussion. We're limiting it to 35 people RSVP. If we get more than interest, then we'll have another one.
Okay, and this is November 14th.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and this is based on what the facilitators' experience are, because facilitators with small tables and breakout, there's only so many people you can do. So 35 was the limit. So assuming you support this, then tomorrow we'll start advertising it. We have a process which is like the Sign Up Genius type of thing that we've been using.
Eventbrite, similar to the
Eventbrite.
Community cookouts.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll take the first 35 that sign up, and then if we need to do another one, we will. And then the dinner and conversation, because we're having 3, I've said, you can go to 1. We'll have to figure out who. More than 2 of you can't be at those. I will likely attend those because I think it's important for me to listen to. We'll see how those, kind of play out. But I think, as Brendan described, less formal, more of a dinner, more of a conversation versus I didn't use the word charrette. We used the word round table with the which I think we changed on the first slide, but we didn't change on the last slide, by the way, Hillary. So if you go back to the first slide, you'll see that meeting we referred to as a community roundtable. So that basically means people sitting around round tables having facilitated conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Reeves.
Thank you. I just wanted to really echo Councilmember Knight's comments on the appreciation I have for our consultant being really flexible and adding these additional community exchanges. And I think that really speaks to the council direction, which was once we received some feedback about that and thought about it, that it really is important to get more and not just a few comments. And I have to say, extending to February for the coffees is really important as well. I don't know very many communities who offer one-on-one exchanges with people so that they can state their position or their idea or their concept in sort of a private setting. So I really, really appreciate all of that. And I have to say that this idea of form-based architecture, which you introduced in your first presentation, is one of the things that makes some towns feel good versus other towns that feel disjointed. And I really appreciate that approach as well. To be able to reuse buildings is part of the history of the town. So if you lose that building, you lose some history. So it is really important, I think. And I love the timeline and the number of possibilities of interacting. My only suggestion or question is whether we've provided enough sort of specific invitations to employers and workers in town to offer their ideas or their wishes, druthers, whatever you want to call it, about how Yountville might address their needs. So that would be my only question.
Yeah. And I think we talked a little bit about it. We are reaching out to the employers. I think employees, truthfully, they're living day to day. I think they're not thinking, where am I going to live in 3 to 4 years when this gets built? I think that, there might be some that want to come. But I do think the employers, we have reached out to. We have had some visit, or had a cup of coffee with Brendan. And I think, we need to make a concerted effort to try to get more employers over there.
Right. It's not that we or have an expectation of their participation, but to provide the space for that to happen, I think is important.
Yeah, for sure. And, we do have 2 major employers on our Measure S committee, I'll note, which is important.
Yeah.
Councilmember McKee-Kent, comments?
Yes, definitely want to commend the leadership, in this case, Brendan and Carrie and Brad, also for being flexible and fluid in evolving our approach. I think the Million Cups of Coffee was a wonderful personal first start, but to listen to the appreciated feedback from community members and to kind of adopt other ideas in the approach has been excellent. I do, with the signage for Join the Conversation, there is no mention of the meetings. I mean, obviously the sign needs to be clean, but it seems like there needs to be a place to be able to update it and put inserts for the dinners and such. And I'm also concerned that it's not translated into Spanish. And as we're talking to employers, it is that back of the house that makes the less amount of money and probably drives the furthest. So if we truly want to be green and make a concerted effort to make sure that the people that really need the housing the most, I think we want to make sure that we're not missing that opportunity. And then my last question is the vehicle for reporting back. What would that look like after the dinners and after this big meeting on the 14th?
Well, I'll hopefully answer, and Brendan, you can come up and, the workbook that's attached is kind of, I think, the document that's going to kind of evolve during the next, 3 to 4 months, right? And I think that
excellent.
Yeah, and so I think that will depend on the input that's received, and ultimately we want to have what I say, I put it in quotes, conceptual approval, because I think I've said to Gary, it's a CEQA term of art because you can't consider a project and so forth. So concepts, it's like how defined can you get in a concept? And I do think, depending on how the workbook evolves, more the better as far as I'm concerned, because we don't want to have too many question marks, because then you get into another round of visioning versus like planning, which is like, how are we going to build this? How much is it going to cost? How are we going to pay for it? But that's where the balancing act will have to occur over the next 4 months.
It's a 30 or 40-page booklet in our background. It will look good on your coffee table graphically, but it also needs to be really clear and understandable, because you will be given some options, some alternatives, and this group will say, not flexible enough, that doesn't sort of, respect history or whatever, or doesn't respect the trail, whatever. You're going to have a chance to sort of eliminate some alternatives and say, okay, it's going to be these two or these three or whatever. And that document will be yours to edit, and that will be the thing that, concept is done, and you can move on to the next. It's a good milestone. And when everyone forgets about, like, hey, didn't you think of this or this? Everyone can go back and say, oh, yeah, that's why they didn't do that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, that's the last part. Any public would like to come up and make a comment? This is your opportunity. Come on up to the microphone, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's Michael Bork. I only wanted to mention that this has been a really lovely session for me. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. There have been a lot of negative comments over this last month or so that indicated that the town council in the town of Yountville wasn't doing enough to engage people. And this is convincing me that you're doing a lot. I just wanted to get up and encourage you, perhaps in the Sun or something else like that, to share more of this with the community, because apparently a lot of people are not following. And in fairness, that includes me. I learned a lot of things about what you're doing today that I'm really excited about. And I think that there must be a lot of people in town who, by virtue of living life, have no clue as to the work that you guys are doing. As I said, I think some of this, there's been some really unfair criticism around lack of community involvement, and it's the community's fault. But I would encourage you to do something really meaningful. Again, for me, it might be the Sun. That might give people a much better idea of what's happening, how it's going to happen, how they could be engaged in it, and even sharing some of the examples of what we saw today about some of the different concepts, I think would be very powerful. And I thank you guys for your work.
All right, thank you. Anybody else want to come up and address this? Seeing none, I'm going to thank everybody and move on to, I think I'm going to get pretty close to my timeline here. Council meeting reports. I've been going to lots of meetings. I'll be pretty quick. We've had a couple flood control meetings. We're getting ready for the next phase of the build out of the flood wall down in Napa, and so we're really spending a lot of time in closed session talking about easements and how much we're offering people and how much they want, and sometimes we actually have to go into open session and because we're directing staff towards eminent domain activities when things don't work out. We also had Upper Valley Waste Management meeting a couple weeks ago where the company came and told us that they were just really losing a lot of money with the Clover Flat landfill. So they own a lot of different sites around the area, and so they're considering either a site down in Solano County or maybe even up in Mendocino, and it's all very draft right now because there's going to be a lot of regulatory activity to actually close the landfill, and it's going to take 2 years of permitting activity just to kind of call it closed, but then 30 years of monitoring. Things just don't close. like that. So that's, it'll probably be at least a couple years before they do that. They might actually use some of the landfill as a transfer station, so the trucks with our waste would take it to bigger trucks, and so we wouldn't have all the little garbage trucks either going to Solano or up to Mendocino County, but the bigger trucks would be going. And we had an MBTA meeting. I wasn't able to attend. I'll let Robin do that. And we've had several committees talking about our 60th anniversary next February 4th. And we are planning, and just like this housing's coming along quickly, so is that date. And so we've got, I'm sure we'll have staff give some updates later, probably not tonight, but we've got a history committee where we're talking about things we want to do at a council meeting, and also maybe ceremonial things, bringing some people in, some flags and stuff like that we'll get into later. We also have an event committee, so stay tuned. It's going to be our Diamond Jubilee, 60 years. We're going to have a big party. So, end of that. Anybody else have any council meetings? Yep, button's not working.
Just to add that, real Mayor, and then we can come back with a formal more. But I did see and approved a save the date that will go in the sun, so that people can start to put that date on their calendar. And we also will be celebrating, on top of everything you just said, the opening of all the interim uses at the Commons. So that's another big milestone for us.
So if you thought February was going to be boring, it's not. So stay tuned. Councilmember McKee Kent.
Just to update on NVTA, Measure U has been on the ballot, and certainly from that standpoint, we hope that it passes. It's an extension of a current tax. It's not an add-on, but it would free up funds that we would also require regional support to work on the airport interchange. So 29 and 12 intersects in two places, and there's just huge backups. So now that the roundabouts are done, we need the traffic to flow so people can get to work, or we could get to Kaiser, and the commute would be that much easier, and our visitors coming to the valley wouldn't be sitting in traffic and thinking that maybe they should be somewhere else where they're not having to sit in a backup. So hopefully that will pass, and we'll get the funding that we need to keep traffic moving.
Okay. Any other meeting reports from anybody? Councilmember Reeves.
I just wanted to report at the Climate Action Committee, we had a presentation by Heidi Sanborn. She is a consultant and also a principal in several nonprofits who really was spearheading SB 54, which is the extended producer responsibility bill that will assist California in requiring that packaging be either compostable or recyclable, and that those facilities either exist or that those producers will provide those facilities. And she had a really lot of good things to say about what's coming up, but it doesn't come up until I think 2027 and 2032. So in the meantime, I just wanted to let council know that our ad hoc committee is working on our local foodware ordinance that will assist us in, helping residents and visitors understand what they can do with the takeout containers that we all get every day if we use that service, and to make sure that those takeout containers are either reusable or recyclable or compostable. So we're hoping to get a draft ordinance in front of our business community in January, February, and hopefully bring it back to the council in the middle of February.
All right, thanks. Seeing no more meeting reports, can I get a motion to adjourn to our next meeting, which will be November the 19th at 3 p.m.
Mayor, I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
All right, can we get a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and all in favor say aye. Aye. That's unanimous, so it is a wrap, and congratulations to all the winners of our election as they hold up.
Find out.
Yep.